Alright everyone, welcome back again to more Witch on the Holy Night. We are currently on chapter 10, I believe, known as The Howling. And I think this visual novel has a total of 13 chapters, so we're pretty much close to the end already. But I also believe there is some bonus chapters I've yet to check out, so I'll be covering that too. If anything, I'm probably going to be covering everything on this visual novel prior to completely ending it. So we're not completely done yet, guys, so don't worry. If anything else, we're going to continue on from where we last left off, so I hope you all continue to enjoy. Thank you again for all the love and support, and let's continue on. Alright everyone, and we are back.
そう、番犬にもならないだろうけど。
Aoko responded, already tired of the conversation. While Sojiro had little room to counter, he still tried.
しかし一方、番犬は間違っても自分の食い縁を入れたり、天津さえ家賃を払ったりしないのも事実であった。
That's true.
なんか言った？
いや、負け犬の遠吠えを少しばかり。
He raised his hand dismissively, knowing he could not win. To Aoko's ears, his attempt at self-deprecation sounded fallacious.
宗十郎、あんた、本当にわかってる？
そうだな。君たちがどうあっても掃除をする気がないぐらいは、なんとか。
Aoko grinned at her pet's obedience. As long as he knew his place, that was all that mattered to her. That smug grin again. I both love and hate it. She seemed to be extremely satisfied with his response.
余裕あるんだ、しずきくんってば。
Her playful smile darkened, as did Sojiro's expression.
青崎、なんだか息ができないんだけど。
このまま放っておくと、そんなことも言ってられなくなるんだけど、試してみる？
Wait, is she choking him with the collar that was her gift? Oh my god. He shook his head, expression growing more and more grim.
賢明ね。私も窒息したいなんて見たくないもの。
The grating sound subsided. Sojiro gingerly touched his throat. The collar that had suddenly tightened around his neck returned to its normal size.
気管が塞がれた時の苦しさを知らないんだろう、青崎は。本当に抵抗できなくなるんだぞ、あれは。
You know what breaks my heart and also entertains the hell out of me is the fact that he willingly put the collar on anyway. The choker, I'm sorry. Oh man.
だからそのための首輪だって言ったでしょ？今まで実践したことなかったし、あんたは相変わらず危機感ないし、心で一度しつけておいたの。それより掃除、急がないと日が暮れるんじゃないの？
はあ、わかったよ。結局、今日はこうなる星の運びだったんだ。
Sojiro left the sunroom, his shoulders slumped and his tail between his legs. Aoko watched him leave before turning to her magazine as if nothing had happened. Alice paid no attention. None of that had anything to do with her. With Sojiro gone, the room once again fell silent. As the clock ticked on, Alice suddenly stopped flipping through her book.
ねえ、どうして彼を酷使するの？
She asked as though talking to herself. Aoko replied without so much as looking up.
別に最後には記憶を消させてもらうんだから、楽しかったら困るじゃない。
Obscure as ever, but sincere in her own way.
そう。言われてみればそうだったわね。
Alice could not believe she had forgotten about the situation. Silently, she looked up from her book and gazed outside once again. The courtyard through the window reminded her of where she lived a decade ago. Nothing could compare to the beauty of those gardens. But if that was the case, why did the scenery make her feel nostalgic? All Sojiro had done was take care of the gardens with the goodness of his own heart. In only half a day, he had achieved so much. It was Christmas Eve and snow had started to fall. Its timing was too good, as though it had waited for that day specifically. The cold, bustling main street seemed bright and vibrant under the layer of frosty white. Reindeer statues illuminated the surroundings. Children danced merrily to jingle bells. People walked along the brick road, smiling broadly. These festivities, however, had not reached the mansion on the hill. Silence enveloped the isolated building. The shadow of the snow-covered woodland grew longer, beckoning in the darkness. People returned to the warmth of their homes, knowing a bitter night lay ahead. Something had been amiss in the mansion all day. Perhaps it was the calm before the storm. 2 days had passed since Toko Aozaki had revealed herself. Aoko and Alice spent more and more time locked in their rooms. Meal times had grown noticeably quieter. With their roles decided, they were too busy with their own jobs to worry about each other. On this day, the two had been relaxing in the drawing room since morning. The mood was calm. Well, mostly at least. Sojiro was fretting that tonight would be the same.
雪が明日ならよかったのに。
He aimed his words towards the girls on the sofa, despite knowing they would be ignored. Whether the snow fell today, tomorrow, or not at all, it did not affect them. The snow just meant a white Christmas. Aoko remained silent. She wasn't ignoring him per se, she just had other things on her mind. Sojiro knew this, but still cast a lonely glance around the sunroom. The courtyard he had cleaned only a few days ago was hidden by a layer of white. The falling snow would stop every so often, but then resume again as if teasing Sojiro. By the next morning, the courtyard would be a winter wonderland. Aoko and Alice sipped tea in an effort to fight the cold. In fact, that was all they were doing.
そういえば、瞳子さんの髪の色は青崎より濃かったね。あんな綺麗な赤毛は初めて見た。短くしてるのはもったいなかったな。
Sojiro rambled on, not expecting a response. However,
短かったって姉貴の髪が？
Aoko's expression went from nonchalant to its usual sharpness.
それどういうこと？短くしてるって髪の毛のことよね。
ああ、アリスより短かったけど、それがどうしたんだ？
別に、あの人前は私より長かったってだけ。そう、あの髪を切ったのね、姉貴は。
Aoko spoke in a grave tone. Showing slight interest, Alice turned to Sojiro.
普通じゃないな。髪を切ったぐらいでどうしたんだ一体。瞳子さんの髪が短いと青崎が困るのか？
まあその通りだけど。いいわ、どうせ夜まで暇だし説明ぐらいはしてあげる。あんたがそんなこと言わなければ未知数のまま瞳子と戦う羽目になっただろうし。
Aoko knowingly glanced at Alice, her expression suggesting she was treating her. She was also likely seeking approval. Alice remained stoic as ever, her expression showing neither approval nor disapproval.
簡単に言うと、魔術師にとっては髪の毛も武器ってことよ。昔から人間の髪や目は魔術の材料になりやすいの。女の場合はことさらにね。瞳の色は多いほどいいし、髪も長いほど質がいい。髪の毛は自身と同一視しやすいし、長い年月をかけて育てられる原始的で強力な原料と思ってくれていいわ。私が髪を伸ばしてるのはまあそういうこと。手入れが大変なんだけど、そこは女だから半分趣味みたいなもんよね。
Sojiro glanced furtively at Alice, wondering if the same held true for her. Maybe Alice had cut it because it was a hassle to maintain. It sounded stupid, but then again, this was Alice. Sojiro nodded to himself.
ん？じゃあ青崎としてはいいことじゃないか。瞳子さんの髪短いんだから。
それがここに来る前に使い切ったものならいいんだけど。伸ばした髪にはいろいろと使い道があるのよ。私は瞬間的な術の強化にしか使えないけど、姉貴だったら高級的な術の補佐に使うはず。年月と想念を蓄えた髪は魔術師の分身とも言える。そういったものをね、死んじゃった犬だの猫だのを反言させるときに与えると、術者に服従する使い魔が出来上がるの。生前魔力のなかった使い魔。例えば猫とか犬ね。これらは術者の髪を取り込んで独自の魔術回路を得る。申請することで全く違う生き物、猫の魔術師になるってこと。例えば人語を介したり人間に化けてみたりって。行動原理も変わってしまって大抵は術者に似通った性格になるわ。そうよね、アリス。
Her last words came with a mocking smile. Alice silently ignored it.
じゃあ瞳子さんにはアリスのみたいな使い魔がいると。
そう見るのが妥当でしょうね。姉貴は20年以上伸ばし続けた髪と引き換えに強力な使い魔を用意したってことよ。
The fight at the amusement park. Just the thought of Alice Kuonji releasing Flat Snark sent a shiver down Sojiro's spine. The oil of the moon had been a unique familiar out of this world.
ほら、そこ心配しない。三崎町をぶっ壊す規模の使い魔なんてありっこないから。確かに長く歴史のある紙を使用するほど強力な使い魔が出来上がる。けど紙を使った魔術師はそれまで溜め込んできた山中のうちの一つを初めからやり直さないといけない。切った紙はまた伸ばさないといけないでしょ。使い魔を作るのは簡単だけど、そう多く従えないのはそういうことなの。
As Aoko spoke, her mood visibly improved, as though she had made a breakthrough.
犬とか猫か。
Tilting his head to the side, he could not imagine a world where dogs and cats were so powerful.
変ね。瞳子さんは人魚師よ。使い魔を作って自分のレベルを下げるのはどうなのかしら。
協力者がいないだけでしょ。青崎のお家騒動に人の手を借りたくないから自分だけで全部やるつもりなのよ。あ、もしかして遊園地の人形って姉貴の紙で作られたんじゃないだろうな。
確かに話に聞いた限りだと特注品ね。呪いによる永久期間、両手のギミック、フィンの一撃、執念深さ。
けど何よアリス。
あの人は人形に自己を投影するような人じゃないわ。完璧な偽物なら許すけど、偽物に過ぎない偽物は容赦なく壊してきた。青子から見て、その特注人形は瞳子さんと同じ力量を持っていた。
まさか遠く及ばないわよ、あんなの。
なら瞳子さんの髪とあの人形は別件よ。あの人が自分の魔力を分け与えたほどの使い魔があと一体はいると見るべきね。
専門家としての意見。つまりその使い魔は姉貴より強い。
そうでないと意味がないわ。人手が足りないというのもあるでしょうけど、だって私たちは2人、彼女は1人だもの。
同時制圧も想定済みってわけ。 なるほどね。その場合、どっちが強い方を引き当てても恨みっこなしよ、アリス。こと使いまであんたが遅れを取るとは思えないけど。
Alice had never been defeated by a familiar. She sided Aoko's overconfidence.
青子、たとえ20年間の蓄えを付与したとしても、その器が小動物では限度があるわ。あの瞳子さんが切り札になる使い魔を用意したのなら、それは。
よしてよ。いくらなんでも姉貴はそこまで悪趣味じゃないわ。
Aoko and Alice stared at each other. The conversation had returned to the drawing room, but the subject matter was not for the faint of heart.
そうね。けれど、人間を追い詰めるのに最も効果的な相手は、やっぱり人間なのよ。瞳子さんが死者を亡者にしていなくても、それと同格の相手がいるぐらいは覚悟しておいて。
はいはい、わかったわよ。確かに天才ってやつは空気読めないから。どんな生き物の死体を用意してきても驚かないわ。
Aoko nodded reluctantly at Alice's directness. Needless to say, Sojiro was completely lost.
よくわからないけど、なんで青崎たちは死んでるってことに固執するんだ？生きてるものじゃダメなのか？
それは使い魔じゃなくて協力者でしょ。使い魔は基本、術者なくしては生きられないものにしないと。それでいて優れた意志を持ち、術者の資格や盲点を補える知性もある。それが一流の使い魔の条件よ。正直な話、それだけ都合のいいやつは死から作り直すしかないってわけ。
Completely obedient and capable of compensating for their mage's weaknesses, Sojiro felt that a familiar was a little different than himself.
さて、姉貴は昔からルーン使いだったから戦術は予測できる。問題の切り札もどうやら使い魔らしい。自動人形もさすがにこの前で使い切っただろうし。
Aoko spoke directly to Alice, looking for confirmation. Alice nodded in agreement.
じゃあ予定通り今日で終わりにしよう。この1ヶ月好き放題やられた借りギッタンギッタンにしてあのバカ兄貴に返してやる。
Aoko clenched teeth and balled her fist. It all seemed like nothing more than sibling rivalry. In fact, that's probably all it was. Looking at Aoko, Sojiro let out a sigh of relief. But what happened with Toko and how they reacted to her visit, the atmosphere had been deathly tense. For now though, Aoko seemed much calmer. He took comfort in the thought that perhaps the sisters would just bury the hatchet. Even if Aoko and Toko were not sisters, he would not want to see what would happen if they fought. The hands of the clock turned gently. Approaching Judgment Night, a merciless silence would soon come to mock Sojiro's complacency. As night appeared, two things vanished. The first was the whimsical snowfall. The second was the lights of the mansion on top of the hill. Aoko and Alice were nowhere to be seen inside. Only Sojiro remained. It was the night of Christmas Eve. Though Aoko and Alice had yet to find Toko, they knew everything would be concluded over the course of this day and the next. Christmas comes about once a year. It was a singular time for endings and new beginnings. In Japan, the modern holiday dated back only about 100 years and celebrated Christ's birth only in name. With all its latter-day trappings, it was neither a pure homage nor a corruption of the festival that inspired it. Regardless, there was a significant increase in the land's mana during festivals. Such charge distortions were a boon to a mage's craft, be it creative or destructive. Toko Awazaki sought to destroy the local sigils, which gathered and properly cycled the magical energy of the land and its people. Sojiro was able to gather that much from Aoko and Alice's conversation. Toko had already claimed 3 sigils. Only 2 remained. Any further loss would signal Aoko and Alice's defeat. In order to protect the remaining ones, they had to split up. Aoko lacked power, so she would need to borrow a ploy from Alice and head to Tokawa Sigil, which boasted the greatest local energy supply. Alice would go fully equipped to the sigil in Yashirogi. Free from the constraints of civilized society, magecraft is most powerful at midnight. The young witch and the apprentice mage wished each other luck before leaving the mansion. It was almost 10 at night. After the girls set out, the first 2 hours passed quickly. When Aoko was ready to head off, Sojiro walked with her to the foyer. Neither had spoken a word to each other. She had departed without showing any sign of fear. It was difficult to tell whether she did not want to get him involved or whether she did not see him a worthy ally in combat. The thought stuck with him. He let out a long sigh. Not out of dejection or frustration. It was a mechanical, emotionless breath. He sat on the near-frozen floor, staring vacantly up at the skylight. Moonlight peeked through the clouds. He imagined the moonlight bouncing off the town's powdery blanket and illuminating the night. But he would not find himself downtown. Watching from the sidelines was his role to begin with. His roommates and he lived worlds apart. He could not keep up with them, and if he did not show the same kind of will, he would remain on the sidelines. However,
そうか。この手が必要な時はもうないのか。
Sojiro looked up at the moon. Somewhere deep inside, he felt a trickle of sadness. Veiled in white and cloaked in darkness, the park seemed like a forgotten memory. Not a soul was in sight. The night felt far more enigmatic than usual, yet the air was clean enough to drink. Though only a sliver of moonlight peered through the clouds, it lit up the entire world. In those moments, the young girl's footsteps echoed, trampling the still white silence under a midnight sun. The pale moon illuminated the inky blue sky. Only a few streetlights and an incongruous phone booth betrayed signs of civilization. A girl appeared dressed in black. Against the snowy landscape, the figure of Alice Kuonji was unmistakable. Pure black, deeper than even the night. Were her overcoat, gloves, and hat, even her hair and eyes. Nothing stirred for a time. Not Alice, nor the white scenery. The world was still, painting of a snowy field. Only time moved gradually, darkening the lights in the park, and eventually the nearby homes as well. Yashirogi was a more modern and developed town than Misaki. Though the park was located in the center of town, it had become a blind spot. It had been overlooked by developers and carried no commercial value. A few houses encircled the park, the streetlights turned off at midnight. It was a white night. People, even machines, were fast asleep.
私が先なのね。
Alice whispered, watching the streetlights slowly fade. She thought she heard a dog howling in the distance. Perhaps it was howling at the moon. The howl reached deeper into the night than expected. A wolf, maybe? The phone rang. It was perhaps the first time it had rung since Sojiro moved into the mansion. Hesitantly, he picked up the receiver and brought it to his ear. He heard nothing. He felt he had to say something, but could not think what. Maybe something like, "Hello, Kuronji residence." Or maybe, "You reached the Awazaki residence." While he was in deep thought, a voice as light as air came through the receiver.
しずき。
Sojiro could barely hear the voice, but it was definitely Alice's.
そうだけど、アリス
No response. The silence was as profound as the night. But before the sound of the stack from the receiver. After a long pause, Alice finally spoke.
青子はいる。
いや、まだ帰ってないけど。
そう。
Sojiro wondered if she had had something to say but could not respond in time. She sounded like she got hurt. Slowly they advanced, carving through the fresh snow. There were so many. Where had they all come from? Dozens of feral dogs snarled at Alice, their eyes trained on her. The snow clung to the beast's mangy fur. Their clenched fangs and bloodshot eyes hid a barely reined hunger that might burst forth like lightning at any moment. They yearned to taste their warm flesh and satiate their empty bellies. To them, the girl in black stood like a lighthouse in a stormy sea. She watched them, disinterested. It appeared that the Yashirogi Sigil was the key target tonight, not Tokawa where Aoko had gone. Alice had always been unflappable, and the child's play before her was hardly about to change that. Her main enemy was not the dogs surrounding her, but the lone mage behind them, Toko Aozaki.
ひどい趣味。ここ数年で品が落ちたの？まあ、それならそれで嬉しいけど。これが地金なら、青崎との付き合いもいよいよ白紙に戻せるわ。
Toko laughed at the acerbic taunt.
いやいや、これは不可抗力でね。安心しろアリス。間違っても私の趣味じゃない。
Crunching through the fallen snow, Toko slowly came into view. She wore a moss green coat that contrasted sharply with Alice's garb. That coat has a lot of buttons. I've been meaning to say that for a while now, but every time I see it, it just it bothers me that it has so many buttons. A silk scarf warmed her neck. She stood tall, her hair short, striking a more valiant posture than any young man. After all, the two standing here needed to be less like a shining moon. And more like the darkness surrounding it. The barking abated. Like servants in a royal court, they averted their eyes from their ruler, lest their eyes and hearts be plucked out.
久しぶりだね、アリス。
瞳子さんもお元気そうで。
They stood about 12 feet apart. No love had been lost between them. Just two enemies. One who was to be victorious and one who was to fall.
さて、どうしようかアリス。積もる話もある。君の近況にも興味がある。そもそも今回の件についていろいろと説明したくてたまらない。5分ほど時間を割いても構わないか？
お断りよ。あなたと5分も話をしていたら、その隙に内臓まで売却されそう。
The following events unfolded quickly. Boldly and without a second thought, Alice pulled out a cat's bell from the seam of her mantle and dropped it. Diddle diddle. The beginning of Alice Kuonji's magecraft, the start to a night of fairy tales. Aoko favored a quick draw approach like something from a western. However, Alice preferred sleight of hand. She used her target's blind spots against them, ending the game before they knew it had begun. The bell fell, like a coin into a fountain. Then, as it was about to strike the ground, it shattered, disappearing without a trace.
ルーン。
ああ、1日かけて公園中に刻ませてもらった。この公園の道はレンガだからね。手間こそかかったが簡単な仕事だった。周りの森まで見て、ざっと400平米のキャンバスだ。
Alright guys, I'm gonna end the video here for today. Thank you all for watching. When we come back, we're gonna continue on with the confrontation between Alice and Toko.